There are over 200 creatures in ARK, some of which are rarely ever used, therefore left forgotten. In this video I wanted to showcase my top 10 forgotten creatures in ARK, showing some love to the creatures that most players will typically skip in favor of other creatures. Who knows, maybe you'll discover some cool creatures with some awesome abilities you didn't know about. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Kicking off our list is a dino in desperate need of a TLC update, the Patchy, a dino I almost never bother to tame. However, it does have a small amount of utility going its way if you do manage to tame one in the early game, as they are found spawning around the beaches and jungles on most maps and also in the sunken forest on Extinction. Can be bowlered and tamed via typical knockout methods, preferring simple kibble for the best taming effectiveness, but you'll most likely tame it on any berries you can find. Saddled up at level 14, which is crafted from the player's inventory. Even though it is a herbivore, it cannot gather berries for itself, which really winds me up. It can, however, gather small amounts of wood and thatch. Other than that, its utility comes with its headstrong attacks, a primary headbutt which deals a bit of damage, while also dealing 1.7 times torpor. However, it will likely kill most creatures with this attack. Its secondary attack consists of a charge which, when aimed at targets, deals a whopping 3.5 times torpor of damage dealt, which is where it becomes very useful as it can aid you in knocking out a wide variety of creatures. Even with damage numbers turned on, the Patchy's charge damage doesn't show up, but I can assure you it deals quite a lot of torpor and a lot less health damage to targets as opposed to the regular primary attack. I wholeheartedly believe the Patchy's charge to be a very underrated ability, considering it is a starter creature. It's just a shame that this is all the Patchy has going for it. I've been crossing my fingers for many years that the devs show this guy some love and give him a cheeky TLC in the future. Up next is the Diplodocus. It is a creature I sometimes like to use at the early game, and I wanted to show it some love here in this video. Found commonly spawning around the swamps on most maps, and in the blue zone on Aberration. It can be bowlered and is tamed via typical knockout methods, preferring simple kibble or any type of meat. Once tamed, it does not require a saddle to ride, however it does need to be in water for the player to be able to hop onto its back. The Diplodocus is a very fast swimmer, but it is very frail in terms of stats, so it is not used to fight anything other than trilobites, which it will deal a massive 10 times damage to. Trilobites are a great source of chitin and rarely silica and black pearls, making them great for gathering small amounts of these rare resources. It has the unique ability of being a portable scuba tank, where it can share its oxygen stat with its rider. Scuba gear is unlocked at level 80, which is relatively high, especially if you're new to the game and are enjoying it at a steady pace, which makes the Diplodocus very useful for newer players. It will give you quick and full access to those ocean resources like silica pearls and oil, etc, etc. Having a fast enough swimming speed to outrun any threat the ocean has to offer. It can heal very quickly when force-fed meat when submerged, which is nice due to them not having saddle armor and a pretty low health stat. Plus I guess they're kinda cute, right? We then have the pub-crawling, beer-loving Calicotherium, a creature I have a lot of love for. However, it seems that no one ever tames them. You'll find them more commonly spawning in the snow biome, and rarely the jungles on most maps. Tamed passively, where it is recommended to don a full set of ghillie armor, walk behind it with beer jars in your final hotbar slot, and shove the jars of beer up its bum. Sounds simple, however it's quite the mission to brew some beers in this game, as it takes a lot of time and effort, which is probably the main reason why people shy away from taming them. However, it can be saddled up at a low level of 42, boasting relatively decent stats across the board, while dealing decent base damage with its primary attack, which comes in the form of a giant slap. It also has a bite attack which can be performed by pressing the crouch button and deals slightly less damage than the primary attack. Both of these attacks, especially the bite attack which can be used while running, are great for harvesting berries and thatch, and small amounts of wood, but it comes into its own with its ranged attacks, launching rocks at its enemies and deals some hefty damage, which does also scale with its melee damage stat, by the way. This does deal some hefty damage to wooden structures, so it can be useful as an early game PvP sieging mount. It does also have a sit option that can be accessed via its radial menu, which will decrease its food consumption by 50%, while also healing it for 2% per second up to 50%. It can also be set into turret mode via the radial menu, making it a great base defender too. And although it is outshone by many other creatures, taming up a high-level male and female with strong base stats and breeding them up can be quite useful in defeating bosses, as they do also have access to the healing effect of sweet veggie cakes. I am a firm believer that the Calicotherium has and always will remain to be a super underrated creature. In at number 7, we have the Ichthyornis, quite possibly the most annoying creature in the game when encountering it in the wild. However, it is a very useful companion if you manage to tame one. Found commonly spawning around the beaches on most maps or the sanctuary on extinction. It can be bowled and easily knocked out, preferring regular kibble for the best taming effectiveness, or any type of fish meat if you don't have access to that. Once tamed, it can be picked up by the player, acting as a shoulder pet. Because of this, it has the bonus of giving 50% weight reduction to anything inside its inventory when perched on your shoulder, allowing you to carry many more items when out exploring. It has a regular dive attack which can pick up small creatures in its beak and deals a lot of damage to fish. If attacking a human, this attack has a chance to disarm the player. This can also be catered to your liking when accessing the radial menu. No hunt, where the Ichthyornis won't grab small creatures and will just attack normally. The hunt option, where the Ichthyornis will grab small creatures in its mouth and consume them after death. And finally, its hunt and retrieve ability, where it will grab and kill small creatures and bring the carcass back to the player. A shiny gold aura will be visible around the carcass, where you can harvest raw prime fish meat or raw prime meat from it. I have heard that dragging a fish affected by the buff can be more efficient in taming the otter or the Hesperornis. I did test this in ARK Survival Ascended, but a 1.3 salmon with and without the buff both gave the same taming effectiveness per feed when taming the otter. But maybe this could work in ARK Survival Evolved. Either way, the Ichthyornis is a great companion to own, especially during the early game. Up next, we have the Gigantopithecus, more commonly found in the Redwoods biome on most maps and the Blue Zone on Aberration. A passive tame which you can think about obtaining once you reach level 30. Tamed passively, where you need to sneak up behind it, preferring regular kibble from your final hotbar slot. Once tamed, they do not have a saddle. However, you can equip them with helmets, and the higher the quality, the better the armor protection. They do have pretty decent stats and can dish out a good amount of damage with their primary attack. They make for quite a handy traveling mount with great speed, agility, and ability to jump. I mean, who doesn't want to be launched into the air like a catapult, right? They are exceptional resource gatherers too, great for harvesting berries and fiber in particular, and other collectibles with the alternate attack, which does include organic polymer from the Aberration bushes, which can now be found in many caves throughout Ragnarok. And what a lot of people don't know is that they can actually pick up small creatures and shoulder pets just like a human can, which is really cool. Having an extra companion on your Gigantopithecus's shoulder almost makes you feel invincible when caving, as you're basically carrying around a small army with you. That is until you come to the realization that your Gigantopithecus's shoulder pet takes the full brunt of any damage, unlike a shoulder pet perched on a human, which is of course fully immune to wild creature attacks. But remember, you do also have the option to also equip high quality helmets to some of the shoulder pets in the game, the Mesopithecus being a great example. Going full monkey might actually be the key to success in life. In at number 5 is the dire wolf, arguably a very popular creature, but I believe most players, including myself, forget how strong the dire wolf actually is, and how beneficial it can be to tame one. I feel like it has a niche fan base, but isn't utilized enough by most players. Found commonly spawning in packs in the snow biomes on most maps, and found pretty much everywhere in the center of the Scorched Earth map, minus the dunes and the mountains. It can be bowled and tamed via typical knockout methods, preferring superior kibble for the best taming effectiveness. But of course, you'll probably tame your first few on raw prime meat or any type of meat. Once tamed, it does not have access to saddle armor, which is its only real downfall. However, due to not having a saddle requirement, you can tame up an army of these beasts in the early game, which is a huge plus point. It has pretty average stats as a lone dire wolf, but does deal some pretty hefty damage with its bite, where it is able to effectively harvest creature carcasses, and is highly efficient in gathering a wide variety of resources. It comes into its own with its pack buffs, which will go up to +4 in a group of 5 or more direwolves, where they receive 5% extra melee damage and 3.5% damage resistance per extra pack member. The highest level of the pack will always be designated the Alpha, where it can perform a howl to buff the pack leader's damage by 25% and damage resistance by 12.5%. It does have some unique abilities going its way too, where it can sniff out nearby explorer notes to gain all those tasty XP benefits, and a passive known as Wound Sniffer, where it allows the rider to see the approximate health of targets visible as a white cross. When below 50%, shows as yellow and progressively turns to red, while also able to detect a corpse with a broken white cross. Along with its strong attacks and pack buffs, the direwolf is agile and is an all-round great traversal land mount. Great for caving, the rider can wield their weapons when mounted, and although they are glass cannons, if you have a strong enough breeding line, they can be a great asset in the boss arena. There's not many that can drain a large health ball quicker than a deadly pack of direwolves can. The strategy strategy heavily depends on your tanky creatures pulling the full aggro of the boss, while the wolves attack it from behind. Not the safest strategy by any means, but it can be done. In at number 4, we have the Carno, a dino I actually have a lot of love for, even if they are butt ugly. And the best thing about the Carno is that it spawns almost anywhere and everywhere, but rarely seen on the beaches. The best locations to search will always be Carnival Islands or the snow biome, as they spawn alongside the Uteranus in groups of 3 or 4. Also commonly in Aberration's green and red zone. Tamed via typical knockout methods, preferring regular kibble for the best taming efficiency. Saddled up at level 46, you will have yourself a pretty nice battle mount, able to easily kill most threats that you face during your early to mid game struggles, while having pretty decent stats across the board, a great sprint speed, and is more agile than most creatures around its size. The Carno also makes for a great cave-in mount, as it will fit into most cave entrances without the need of cryopods. The Carno is also equipped with an alternate headbutt attack, which does deal the same amount of damage as the primary bite attack. However, this attack does inflict a nasty bleed effect, which will drain 5% of the target's health over 10 seconds, albeit a weaker bleed than the much more popular Phylocolio. However, the Carno is much more accessible and easier to tame for newer players. The Carno isn't flashy with its abilities, but it knows how to get the job done for the most part. Up next is none other than the woolly rhino, which evidently has great use in PvP. However, the rhino is left forgotten when playing PvE. Poor rhino. Found commonly spawning in the snow biomes on most maps. Tamed via typical knockout methods, preferring superior kibble for the best taming efficiency. It can be saddled up at level 53. Once tamed, you will have yourself one of ARK's greatest hits. The rhino is a powerful herbivore that poses a threat to anything and everything that stands in its way. It has pretty decent stats across the board, dealing decent damage with its horny primary attack, while also making for a great berry and thatch harvester. It is a sluggish creature at first glance. However, when holding down the sprint button, it will gain speed and momentum, comparable to some of the faster land mounts in the game, while having one devastating attack hidden up its sleeve. A momentum bar is visible on the right of the screen. Increasing in speed will raise the momentum bar, and when at max speed, hit the attack key, and the rhino will ram a target with everything it has, dealing massive damage. I believe it's roughly around 800% extra damage when at full charge. It is a lot. That is all I know. As it is a herbivore, it gains access to the healing effect of sweet veggie cakes. All of these capabilities combined makes it a viable pick in riding one into the boss fight. And it is definitely more viable with the more players you have, but damn, the woolly rhino is a lot of fun. So if you haven't tamed one yet, what are you playing at? Taking the number 2 spot is a highly controversial one. It is the Procoptodon, an extremely popular pick when playing the Scorched Earth map, but I feel like it is left forgotten when playing almost every other map, which could be due to them being a very rare spawn. They are, however, found commonly on any map with a Scorched Earth biome. They are skittish and very quick, so it's best to trap one to tame one via typical knockout methods, preferring rare mushrooms for the best taming effectiveness. But they will eat berries once tamed, where it can be saddled up at the low level of level 23. It is more of a lover than a fighter, having a primary bite attack that deals average damage at best, but does have a secondary kick attack which deals amazing knockback. Both are great for gathering berries, especially the kick, where it can also use this attack to move when over encumbered, so it can come in very handy in certain situations. It does also have a passenger seat in the form of its pouch, where both the rider and passenger can wield their weapons when mounted, while also keeping the passenger warm and snug. The Procoptodon also has a jump which can be held down to charge up and aimed for covering large distances extremely quickly, which can even be used during a sandstorm on Scorched Earth, if for some reason you get caught with your pants down. This jump can be cancelled mid-air when pressing the jump button again, which is a small feature I've come to really appreciate over the years. The Procoptodon comes into its own as a nanny, and will always have your back when it comes to looking after your little ones. It can pick up small creatures and babies in its pouch, and when a baby is inside a female mate boosted Procoptodon's pouch, it will reduce the baby's food consumption by 50% and will also double the imprint bonus that the baby receives from each care. With its speed and agility, makes it an amazing taming aid for solo players. The Procoptodon has and always will be one of my favourite creatures to own in the game. There's just no better feeling than hippity hopping, never stopping to get you from A to B. And to close out the video is once again another controversial pick. It is the Megalosaurus. Controversial because it is probably the most popular battle mount when playing the Aberration map. However, it is left forgotten on almost every other map, as it is a nocturnal predator, making it substantially weaker than most during the daytime. Therefore gets left behind by most players when looking for a battle mount to tame or a boss fighter. You'll find it spawning in caves on most maps, the southeastern side of Extinction City where the deep trench of the shallow water lies, if that even makes sense, and of course very commonly in Aberration's blue and red zones. Tamed via typical knockup methods, if taming one on any other map that isn't Aberration, they will wake up during the nighttime at around 8:30 PM and stay awake until roughly 5:15 AM, where they will curl up into a ball and go back to sleep all day. So it's best to starve tame one, as you will probably have to knock it out a few times to drain its food enough so that it can eat all the taming food in one go, as you could lose it all if it ends up waking up during feeding. But this does all depend on your taming rates, of course. I play on 1x rates and had to knock this 140 out twice to tame it in a 1er. Preferring superior kibble for the best taming efficiency, once tamed can be saddled up at level 57. If woken up during the daytime, they receive the groggy debuff. When in this state, they are super sluggish, attacks deal much less damage, and have a much higher stamina drain. They even lose stamina gradually over time when doing nothing, so they are basically useless in the daytime, which is why most people shy away from taming one at all. However, once the clock strikes 8:30 PM, you will have a beast like no other. They are fast, agile, and extremely powerful, boasting a much higher base damage than the Rex at nighttime, while also having similar health to one. With its secondary attack, it can grab small creatures and humans, and carry them around if need be, or crunch down on its prey and eat them whole. Of course, on Aberration it is constantly awake, which makes it the alpha predator of Aberration, and the best damage dealer for almost any occasion. With its relatively high base health and high damage in attacks, makes it the perfect boss fighter in most arenas, especially now that unridden Megalosaurus in ARK Survival Ascended now use their primary attack over the secondary attack, which was the case in ARK Survival Evolved. This makes them 10 times more viable for boss fights, and the Megalosaurus used here were just perfect tame 150s bred and imprinted with around 600 to 800 damage after levels, which goes to show how powerful they really are. Just be sure to time your boss fights perfectly after 8:30 PM, as the last thing you want is for them to take a cheeky nap, sleeping on the job in the arena. And that is going to be the end of the video for today. I hope you all enjoyed it and found it helpful, and if you did, please don't forget to like, comment, share around, and subscribe for more, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care, goodbye.